we have a chance to talk to artificial intelligence and to ask it what it thinks about the common features between the state policy of modern Russia and Germany in the 1930s. So we asked ChatGPT what he thinks or what it thinks about it. So here's what we got, the answers. So while there may be some similarities between the state policies of modern Russia and Germany in the 1930s, it is important to note that they are distinct historical periods with different contexts. So the following are some general aspects that could be considered as common features, although they should be approached with caution and not overgeneralized. So strong central governments, both modern Russia and Germany in the 1930s, exhibited a strong emphasis on centralization of power within the government. In both cases, the state sought to exert a significant control over various aspects of society. In this point, I want to ask you what is different in this aspect, because we understand that there were some ideology at Nazi Germany, at Hitler's administration of the country. But in this situation in Russia, we understand there are different groups of interest, and one of them, and leading one during all these years, it's a huge business or oligarchs, I'm sorry, how we call it. So is a difference between Nazi Germany and Putin's Russia right now in this aspect?
Well, in terms of oligarchs, actually, no. If you look at Nazi Germany, the huge corporations continued to exist, private property continued to exist, and many of these huge corporations continued to produce what they were producing, whether it was cars or steel or other kinds of machinery. And the same thing happens to be true within the Russian Federation. What is striking is the fact that private property and private businesses, huge businesses, still exist in both countries. At the same time, in both countries, the state was able to control these corporations and these businesses, which is essentially what you find today in the Russian Federation. The oligarchs are there. They're still multi-billionaires. They're not going away. And they have to do essentially what Putin and the central authorities tell them what to do. And the same was true in Nazi Germany. The same was also true in fascist Italy. It's not as if these countries became communist, abolished private property, and abolished private corporations. So the similarities are actually quite striking, even in this particular point of view.
Okay, let's take a look at another aspect, as we already discussed a little bit. It's nationalism. So nationalistic sentiments were present in both eras, GPT chat writes us. Germany during the 1930s saw the rise of extreme nationalism under Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime, while modern Russia under President Vladimir Putin has promoted a sense of Russian national identity and pride. In this case, I want to ask you, what's the difference between two ideologies? And can we call this ideology as well, what is going on in Russia right now? Because when we look back at the history of Nazi Germany, at that time, they had something to be proud of. I mean, the economy of the country started to rise, so people got the opportunity to find jobs and to develop somehow. So in this case of Russia, we see just decrease in the economy and all but they still are proud. What they're proud of, and is that the ideology?
Well, I mean, again, you're asking two questions. One is the question of pride, and the other one is about ideology. So let me address both of them separately. In terms of pride, again, remember the Germans in the 1930s, yes, their economy improved, and in the case of the Russians, their economy is declining. But that wasn't the core of German pride. Or Russian pride. The core of the pride consisted in the fact that both regimes said that they would make Germany, and in this case Russia, great again. right? Both countries had been humiliated. In the case of Germany, it was World War I. It was the case of hyperinflation, economic collapse, cultural confusion in the 1920s. And Germany, which was supposed to be this leading nation, the nation of philosophers and thinkers and poets, had suddenly become this miserable little country that was being exploited by democracies and everybody else. And essentially, Putin is making the same claim. He made this claim 20 years ago when he came to power, and he's still saying the same. I will make Russia great again. We were humiliated when the Soviet Union fell apart. We were humiliated during the Yeltsin years. The Democrats are at fault, and this is exactly the same thing that the Nazis said in Germany, that the Democrats were at fault, the Jews were at fault. Now, in the case of Russia, it's obviously not the Jews, it's the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are the ones who are bringing catastrophe to Russia. So in that sense, the pride has the same focus in both countries. It's pride in the endless, the boundless, the magnificent, the historically unique civilization that is Germany, and the equivalent in the Russian case. And in both cases, the pride isn't just a function of propaganda. It's not as if Hitler or Putin were the first to say that their countries, their nations are somehow unique civilizations. I mean, this was part and parcel of German and Russian political culture for centuries. So what Hitler and Putin have managed to do is they've mobilized this political culture that was there for many years, and to build on it, and to utilize it, to exploit it in order to persuade people that the period of humiliation was over, and now we are entering a new age. So the pride is exactly the same, and the ideological focus in that respect is the same as well. Now, in terms of nationalism or ideology more generally, what is characteristic of fascist regimes, and this is true of Nazi Germany, Italy, as well as of Putin's Russia, is they do have a kind of ideological tendency, but they don't have a coherent ideology in the way that the Soviet Union had. The Soviet Union had an ideological answer for every single question. It was a very complex ideology. It encompassed all of reality. In the case of the fascists, their ideology is much simpler. It consists of the fact that the nation is glorious. It consists of the fact that the leader is always right. It consists of the fact that we need to work very hard for the glory of the nation and the state, right? So it has these components, but they don't amount to a complex, fully ramified and systematic ideological worldview. And in that sense, again, Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and Putin's Russia are very, very similar. They have these sorts of ideological leanings, but they pretty much focus on the same three or four things. The infallible leader, the glorious nation, and the powerful, invincible state. And that's pretty much it. And then they have other bits and pieces depending on circumstances, but that tends to be the core. But it's not really an ideology, not in the sense that we're used to understanding the term when we study the Soviet Union.